We're excited to show you a closer look at EasyRx 3D. EasyRx is a universal lab prescription, digital workflow, and 3D software for practices and labs. Let us show you how EasyRx helps practices and labs better manage the entire lab prescription process. EasyRx integrates with practice management software products, making your workflow seamless. Use the EasyRx Universal Lab Prescription Form to create all your lab, clear aligner, and digital prescriptions through one form. Submit cases to labs with traditional plaster models or impressions, or attach digital files directly to the prescription to send to your labs. With EasyRx, you can submit cases to your commercial labs or your in-house lab. In this video, we're going to walk you through EasyRx 3D, show you how to trim and base a model, preparing it for 3D printing. We'll also show you EasyRx 3D bracket removal to digitally remove brackets from models. So let's take a look. To get started, you need to get the STL files into EasyRx. And there are two ways to do that. One option, you can simply upload an STL file to a patient and then open up EasyRx 3D from the patient file and work in EasyRx 3D. So if you just want to use EasyRx to base models, creating a prescription is not required. You can add a patient, upload the scan, and then work in EasyRx 3D. The other option is to create a prescription and send it to your in-house lab or send it to your commercial lab and let them base it. But if you're going to use EasyRx 3D, you'll want to send the prescription to your in-house lab and attach the STL files to the prescription. If you are an iTero customer, you can enable the iTero integration to attach the scans automatically through the integration. So I'm going to do that now. I've gone to my in-house lab. Here's John Jones. And if I view this prescription, you can see this is a prescription for an aligner, and here are the STL files. You'll also notice two optimized files. EasyRx automatically optimizes scans when they're uploaded. Optimize is a process that we developed to clean up the scan. It doesn't degrade the scan in any way. It just cleans up the surface of the scans, filling any holes or pockets. It isn't a requirement to work with the optimized scan. You can still work with the original, but as a rule, you're going to have a little better experience with the optimized scan. So from here, on the prescription, if you wanted to open up EasyRx 3D, you could click on the file or click on EasyRx 3D, and that's going to launch the model in EasyRx 3D. Now working in EasyRx 3D, you can trim, base, label, and save your models. The interface is very straightforward. At the top left side includes some navigation, allowing you to flip the model around. You can also use your mouse. I'm holding down the left mouse button to spin it, rolling the mouse wheel to make it bigger or smaller. You can choose to optimize an original scan from here if you need to, or use artifact removal to remove any sort of scan defects or remnants, and I'll show you how to use that. Bracket removal is where you work to remove brackets, refine tooth surfaces, where you can clean up the tooth surface perhaps after removing brackets. And then really day-to-day to base a model, on the right, the steps are orient, trim, base, label, and save. So it's very straightforward. Now there are several ways that you can actually trim and base a model. All processes begin with orientation. So I'm going to click Orient Model, and I'm going to click left molar, anteriors, right molar. If the scan only includes 3 to 3, you don't have to click on a molar. Click the furthest back tooth as a rule of thumb. You're really building a triangle for the software, so we can get ready to do the work required to trim and base the model. Now I want to trim this model. In this example, I'm going to do a horseshoe. So I've got really 3 ways to trim the model. Number 1, the orange points are trim points outlining the edge of the model. So option 1 is I can manually drag these trim points to set a new trim path, and that works just fine, except it's very tedious and slow, so we don't recommend this, but it is an option. Option 2 is to use the Easy Model Trim. I'm going to click Easy Model Trim. The trim points are removed, and now you can draw a new trim path. To do so, I'm holding down the Shift key and the left mouse button, and I'm drawing the trim path around. Again, I'm holding down the Shift key and the left mouse button, and then drawing the trim path. I'm working my way around the model, and when you complete the trim path, It's going to turn green, indicating that the trim path is complete. And then you can adjust the trim points as needed. Now, something to consider as you're trimming the model, there is an option where you set the base height. We give you some common base heights: thinnest 2mm, 4mm, 6, 8, or 10. To determine the base height, the software looks at the lowest trim point, the lowest being the farthest from the teeth. In this case, all of my trim points are pulled up reasonably close, except this one trim point. And this trim point will become the marker to determine base height. So if I pick 2mm base height, it's going to set the base height 2mm from this trim point. So you're going to want to make sure you have all of these trim points where you want them, and then I can click Trim Model to trim the model, and that will trim the model. Now, if you don't like your trim path, you can click Adjust Trim. That puts back the trim points, and maybe you can go ahead and just adjust some of these points. Also, it is important to know that you don't have to trim before you add the base. So, you can draw your trim path and then go down to base type. We support a regular or hollow base. In this example, I'm going to do a hollow base. I'm going to pick 2mm base height, then I'll pick 2.5mm wall thickness. And I'm going to hit Add Base. And in one step, that is going to trim and add the base. And you can see now the model was trimmed and has a horseshoe hollow model base. Also, when you complete a step, it collapses a section on the side panel just to save you a little space on the screen. I'm going to click the header to extend that back out. And I'm going to click Undo Add Base so I can show you the third way to trim a model and add a base in one step. This is called Easy Base. Now I'm going to click Easy Base, and that draws a horizontal cutting plane. You can adjust the height of the cutting plane to set your trim path. You can click any of the points, or you can click the large middle point. I'm going to set the trim path and then go down to your base options. Hollow, 2mm base height, 2.5mm wall thickness, whatever you choose, and then I click Add Base. And in this process, it's going to trim and add the base by using Easy Base. So I was able to trim and add the base using the Easy Base feature. Now we have a horseshoe hollow model with a 2mm base, easily done with a minimal number of keystrokes. So I want to show you something else. I'm going to click Undo Add Base, and in this example, I want to add a chamfer to the back of the base. Chamfer is a 45-degree angle cut from the back of the model, allowing you to easily pull the model off of the build plate. So I'm going to click Chamfer, Add Base, and that's going to go to, again, in just one step, Trim, Base, and now add a chamfer to the base. So I did another hollow model, but I chose the option to put a chamfer. You see the chamfered base on the back, allowing you to easily pop it off the build plate. I'm going to undo, add base again to show you something else. Instead of doing a chamfered base, I'm going to add some drain holes, and I'm going to make my base height a little taller, and depending on your 3D printer, you may need to use the drain holes. Drain holes are needed if the build plate and build platform on the 3D printer does not easily allow the resin that's inside of the model when you print hollow to drain out of the model. So you can add drain holes to the base, allowing the resin to drain. Same steps, set your trim path, pick your base options, and now we're going to add drain holes. Okay, so there again is another horseshoe model, but you can see the drain holes we just added. The program automatically adds drain holes on either the back or the side, depending on if there is enough width on the back to properly carve in drain holes, and then one on the front of the model. And these are automatically sized to allow the resin to easily drain out. So I've got this model, and now the next step is to add a label, because you're going to print multiple models at one time, and you need to know who it belongs to when it comes off. And so we've got a couple of options when you're adding your label. You can choose your font size, and you can engrave or emboss. We have some default labels: prescription ID, patient name, patient initials, external bin number, practice, and custom text. The most common, obviously, is patient name. I'm going to choose large font size. I'm going to choose position label, and you just click where you want the label to go. and that's going to add the patient name. And then you can move those points to adjust the positioning of the label. So there's the patient name. Now I'm going to uncheck patient name just to show you something else that you can do. And I'm going to type a number in the custom text. I'm going to position a second label. Just so you can see some of the flexibility, maybe you want to put an aligner number on the side of a tooth. So when you form the aligner around this model, they'll see the aligner number. I'm going to click Add Label, and that's going to add the label to the model once you have positioned it. So you can add 2 labels to each model when you're adding labels. And there is a nice embossed label on the side of that model. To go back to Add Label, you can do different font sizes, engrave or emboss. If you're doing a regular model, you can do the label on the bottom. Some people do that. It's just whatever you prefer. The last step is to save the model. But before I save this model, I want to talk about preserve occlusion, because this is getting more and more important and popular today. Let's say you want to work in EasyRx 3D to trim and base a model, and then you want to move this model to third-party software. Maybe to do an aligner treatment planning software, you would want to choose to preserve occlusion, so the 2 models, the upper and lower, maintain occlusion as they're moved into the other software. If you're going to save the model in EasyRx 3D and print it, no need to preserve occlusion, you can go right to Save Model. We give a default file name with the patient's name and the type of model. You can type whatever you want here to make it easier for you to know which model it is, and then you're going to save the model. What's important to note about saving is it saves back to your EasyRx account. The file is transmitted in an encrypted format to your account, and it's stored in an encrypted format as well. And EasyRx is automatically backing up those files, so not only do we allow you to base your models in EasyRx 3D, we're going to save your models in a secure encrypted environment that we host on the Amazon AWS platform. Now, let's go to our next model to take a look at EasyRx 3D bracket removal and the artifact removal tool. As you can see, I've opened a scan with brackets on it. And the first thing you always do when you work in EasyRx 3D is orient the model. So I'm going to orient this model. I'm going to show you the artifact removal tool. The artifact removal tool allows you to remove unwanted artifacts or remnants from the scan. Perhaps you have some noise around a particular tooth. Maybe the back of the model isn't great. Now, this particular scan doesn't have a large number of remnants, but I think you can get the idea of how the tool works. I'm going to click on Highlight Artifacts, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm just going to say, you know what, I just want to lop off this back part of the model before I trim it, because it's really messy. So I draw the line for the artifact trim path, and then I click Remove Artifacts. And that's going to trim off that back part of the model. And say I want to cut off this part of the model because there's just some bad area there, and I may have trouble trimming it. So you highlight and you click Remove Artifact. It's a very, very handy tool to have in the software. It doesn't require that you scan every scan perfectly, so you have a lot of flexibility to clean up your scans as you're trimming and basing. Now let's do a little bracket removal with EasyRx 3D bracket removal. There are some brackets on this model. It's important to note that to work in EasyRx 3D bracket removal, the scan must be taken with the wire removed. Bracket removal will not work if there is a wire included in the scan, so this scan does not have a wire. Now let's remove some brackets. I'm going to click on Select Brackets, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and left mouse button, much like I did with the Easy Model Trim. But now I'm drawing a path around the bracket. What's important is to not touch the bracket pad or any glue, so you don't draw really close to the bracket, you draw away from the bracket. And then you click Remove Bracket, and that's going to remove the bracket. Easy as that. Let's go to the next one. Again, you draw away from the bracket, not touching the bracket pad or any glue, and you click Remove Bracket. Now this bracket isn't as clean, so let's see what we can do here. Again, I'm going to draw around the bracket. I'm going around away from the bracket, and then I'll click Remove Bracket. Now a little bit of that bracket was up in the soft tissue. So I may want to add a margin to this part of the model. I'm going to go out of bracket removal, and then I'm going to start refining. I'm going to choose margin. I'm going to draw in the margin, something like that. Then I'm going to go over to smooth, and I'm going to smooth the margin. And maybe I do that a couple times to really smooth it, and you'll notice I'm not shaking the mouse, it's a stroke. That looks better. So let's go do this one. And I want to show you what happens when you touch part of the bracket. So I'm going to draw around it, except right there. I'm just going to touch it a little bit, and I'm going to click remove bracket. And you kind of get something like that if you touch the bracket. And you can still recover from that, but had I drawn the path away from the bracket, I wouldn't have had that. But I may want to go over and see if maybe I can carve that out a little bit. So I'm carving that out, and then I'm going to go back to smooth, and I'm going to smooth that out. Now that's probably acceptable to print. So you do have the flexibility to clean up as you are removing the brackets. Now, in our experience, this takes about 4 or 5 minutes an arch, so about 8 to 10 minutes for an upper and lower to remove brackets. I'm not going to go through and remove all the brackets, but at this point, you would just go over and again maybe choose Easy Base, adjust the trim path to the height that you like. If you want a very specific trim path, you would probably want to use the Easy Model Trim. Pick your base type, height, and wall thickness. I'm going to go ahead and chamfer the base. I'm going to click Add Base, and now I've got a model with brackets removed and based. So there we go. There's a nice, clean model. I based the model using the options on the right side of the screen, creating a horseshoe with a chamfered base. Obviously, you would have removed all the brackets if this was in the real world. I'm going to save the model. Again, that's going to save back into your account in an encrypted format. And then after the model has been saved, you need to print your models. You're going to close EasyRx 3D. To help you manage the models that need to be printed and which ones have been printed, we have the STL print lists. These are the models based in EasyRx 3D, and you've got a couple ways to track your cases. Number 1, you can only show EasyRx 3D based files. If you uncheck that, you're going to get all of your STL files. I'm going to check that only to see the based models. And then you have a column over to the right that says printed. As you print your models, you can check that off. If you want to see the models that you need to print, you click only show models not printed. And so here are the models that I have not marked as printed. Then you select the models you want to print. EasyRx integrates with a number of 3D printers. For this video, I have Envision One, SprintRay, and Formlabs integration enabled. And if you're using one of these printers, you would select the files you want to print and select your printer. That's going to download the STL files from EasyRx, launch the 3D printer software, and then pass over the STL files. Working in the 3D printer software, you would arrange the models on the build plate, either printing horizontally or vertically, print the models, make your appliance, and then once you've printed the models, you would come back here and mark the models as printed so you know that they've been printed. So this is a really handy way to manage the models that need to be printed. EasyRx 3D is a very powerful application that's easy to use and cloud-based, allowing you to work securely from anywhere. EasyRx 3D is available on EasyRx 3D Standard and Premium plans, and also for our lab customers in Lab Standard or Lab Enterprise. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about EasyRx or getting started with EasyRx, please feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you.